sort of become jaded, becomes really jaded. And then the Lord just brings something up and
That's
it touches
generally
your heart again.
people that become Adventists or Christians that weren't raised in it.
Yeah, and that's me.
Fortunately, because, but that's good. Okay,
Well, thank you.
So George and Barb, how are you guys doing? We're fine.
Yeah.
We just had an EF2, if you know what that is. I just know it's windy.
Yeah, very.
120 miles an hour. But it just
120, wow.
skirted us this time. Like we told Sandy, 2008, we took a direct hit and lost 50 trees, but
Sure.
this one we just lost, what, 3?
Yeah.
But it hit the house.
Who was on that ladder? Was that you?
No, that
No,
was
that
a
was
service we called.
That's an expert that it wasn't a ladder, it was ropes.
Yeah.
They climbed up
Okay.
using ropes.
I couldn't tell. It looked like logs that were leaning on your porch, so I couldn't tell what
Yeah.
the tree. Did it
That's
hit your
what-
house?
Yeah.
Yeah,
it
the
did.
2 trees hit the porch roof.
Yeah.
That's
Sure.
when we went to the basement for
Yeah.
the second time in 40 years.
Yeah, we had to go to the basement this
I
time.
know.
I'm glad you're
Wow.
okay. That was quite a mess in your yard.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Nothing like last time
yeah.
though.
Like I said, it's all relative.
Yeah.
The last time we took a direct hit and the tornado came and split and went around our house and then kept
Mhm.
going. And like Barb said, we lost 50 trees that time.
Yeah, they fell next to the house, next to our car, but
Mm.
they weren't hurt. It was a miracle.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of
Okay.
our
Glad to hear you.
friends.
Whenever
Yeah.
you're ready, it's on.
Yeah, George, we also had a tornado here, and it's very rare that it comes here in South Africa. We had one 2 weeks ago because of the very weird weather we've had, and it came off the sea in Northern Natal. It's about 120 kilometers from where I am. It came in over the sea, and it took out a complete town.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Amazing
I
what
I
they do.
I actually saw yesterday. I saw that people were collecting for it. Houses, schools, shops, everything just destroyed. This was a massive thing.
Well,
So
the weather
it's very
report,
rare with us.
yeah, they said there were 19 tornadoes just in our area.
Wow.
Northern Illinois and Indiana, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's a lot.
Yeah, it was a
It's a
bad
lot.
storm.
It's a lot. It's a lot. Okay, so folks, once again, Sandy, thank you for inviting me. This evening, I'm not going to talk too long, or I might. I don't know. I never know how long the thing is until I get to the end. Just welcome, happy Sabbath to you all. Let's open with prayer. Our loving Father in heaven, Lord, thank you so much once again for giving us an opportunity to get together as a group, Lord. Well, thank you for giving us Bible Explorations and Sandy that leads it. Thank you for always having this space and place where we can gather with like-minded people, but also, Lord, just to share ideas, to share what we've learned, and to put on the table the things that we think we can add value to through your word. Lord, be with the people who went through the tornadoes, both here in South Africa as well as America. Lord, be with the American government as well as our own government that have to make a lot of decisions on things that will affect our lives directly. Lord, we offer a special prayer for President Trump in America, and that you kept him from harm. Lord, be with each and every one of us this evening or this morning as I speak about this subject. And Lord, did it not come out as being a light subject, or that I make light of it, but rather that I do consider it seriously. Lord, lead us in everything that we do. We ask this in the mighty name of your Son, Yeshua. Amen. So as I said to you guys, I think last week, it's strange how the Lord works, because Sandy asks me normally to speak about something, and I never know what. and then suddenly there's just a topic, and this was the topic that came up last week. First of all, when I was invited to the church again, to my previous church. Doesn't talk to that directly. I was actually wanting to put something in towards that, but I'll do that on another occasion when my heart can actually take it. And like I said, it's the sadness in my heart that gets me. So I'm not ready to really talk about that one for now. But the second thing was a friend of mine, ex-pastor of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, who phoned me just before we went on to Bible Explorations last week, and he basically engaged me on the morning, evening, or even dawn controversy. Now, he left, or let me rephrase, he was let go or fired from the Seventh-day Adventist Church because of his belief in the Father and Son, and the non-belief around the Trinity. And here in South Africa, the management of the church is quite strict on it. And so when he continued with that belief, they obviously let him go. Like I said, he's one of the few people I actually know who then won a labor court case, and the church had to pay him a severance package to let him go. He did very well for himself. I invited him to the very first camp meeting, Tabernacles camp meeting we had in 2017. He did not believe in the feast at that stage. I was just in the throes of, was it 2016, I think. I was in the throes of going through exiting the church and so on, so things weren't very nice at that stage. And I invited him because he had become a persona non grata within the environment. And I think it's very difficult for a pastor when they lose their congregation, when they lose the security of being within the organization that they've worked for. It's difficult for anybody if they basically lose their job. And so after that camp meeting, he then phoned me and said, you know what, he was so thankful that somebody had actually taken the time to consider him as a person. And he would forever be thankful to me because he saw the truth of the feast. And ever since that, he was then, as we euphemistically call it, a feast keeper. But during the time also, that was 2016, 17, 18, there was a lot of controversy, as you guys remember. Solomon Kunu at that stage was over in America. Sandy invited him to go over, and we also had this specific controversy, which was now also affecting our ministry here in South Africa, through various of the members also expressing that they had done the study on the question of when does the Sabbath begin, and that they felt that the Sabbath began at a different time than we had traditionally been holding it. And so it caused some friction within the membership here in South Africa at camp meetings and so forth. And I was watching Solomon Kunu this week, the two presentations, and please go watch it. He really did a good job. Two presentations he did on it at Terabella. And he speaks about, when he starts off, that it's his study, and up until that time, that is what he believes. And I want to reiterate that this is not a study. This is more just my thoughts around it, what I've heard about it. I have not gone into, like Solomon did, the history. He used the paper from Andrews University as the base for his study. It's on the online. I can give it to you as well. It gives the history. It gives the various commentaries, people throughout the ages, and what was said. There's one or two things I've added on that wasn't in there at the end of this one. I'll show you. But he speaks about it, and that he was approached, similarly to myself. We were approached by people who then wanted to really push this specific teaching. Now, for me, there are various teachings out there, and people believe in certain things that I don't believe in. And that doesn't make you my enemy, because I've never gone from this point of view that if you disagree with me, you're my enemy. That is so untrue, both in my secular work, secular life, as well as in the church life. It's something I've always opposed. That, just because I am different to you, just because I differ from you, I am not your enemy. And so every time one of these things come up, you are sort of forced to choose a side. All right. Because typical, the thing that pops up is, if you do not do this, X, Y, and Z, you are not either a child of God, you believe in the wrong God, you believe in the wrong Sabbath, you believe in the wrong. And so it goes on. And so this judgmental attitude comes forth, and it contributes to not a really good spirit. And it creates a wedge rather than it creates a platform where one can discuss this. And so on the evening versus dawn controversy, specifically with Tasha Aramsa, which you all know, Tasha really also pushed quite hard for it for me, and she gave me some paperwork around it. I actually spoke to the lady that had done the study with another gentleman. I'd read through the documentation. There was a lot of reaching. You know what reaching is? It's like if you're an expert on the feasts, you can quickly enough see when they change gears or they reach. They leave out something and they make an assumption, but they make it as though it comes from the Bible. And so there's some of that in here as well. I think for the most part it's in here. And it just, at the end of the day, for me, it's one of those things that, is it really important? Is it not? Yes and no. And do I really want to go down that rabbit hole? No. So, and does it add any value? At this stage, the answer is no. So to reiterate, this is my view, my opinion, whatever. It's not Bible Explorations. It's something that I've known of for quite a while. Okay, I've gone through the controversy with people. We've lost people from the ministry because of it. There are even people who really are extremely come from a judgmental point of view. I had a message, like I said, about a month ago from somebody else that used to be in my ministry as well. Read this, immediately this sort of really forceful type of, if you don't read this, something's going to happen to you. It comes out like a curse. And so I thought, let me this evening just tell you what I think. Okay, and I might be totally wrong, and I'm really open for criticism here. If you believe in this, okay, like I said, I have the documentation. I've seen several studies on it. I haven't gone to it in depth. I've watched Solomon Kunu's study because I know, and then I read through the base of what he used from Andrews University. There was a paper written, quite a nice paper, which uses all the various references, etc., that some of these people use. And to me, the paper quite effectively explained and gave me the confidence that I was still sort of on the right track when it came to when to keep the Sabbath. And so you'll see there at the bottom, I said, is it a hill worth dying on? I mentioned to you the other day that, you get involved. You were talking just now about the Facebook things. And, there are so many Facebook battle groups, as I call them. Okay. It's like if you ever watched the movie Star Wars, There's a lot of episodes in this battlefield going on Facebook, and it normally ranges around the Trinity, the Father and Son, which is the biggest one on Facebook. Then there are some, lesser ones on the feast, and then there obviously is some of this as well. But a person that was on the Trinity site the other day, a veteran in America, got very angry very quickly, in terms that he was in the church, still believed in the Trinity, and off the cuff he immediately attacked. And he told me that this is a hill worth dying on. Well, really, is that what the Lord expects us to do? Do we defend every single thing, or do we choose our battles? So it's also maybe something to think about. Do we have to go out there and, like Peter, cut off the ear of the centurion every time we disagree with something? Because that really is what it is about. So let's just quickly start off by putting the base of it. And so what do we believe in general? You might be slightly different, but this is what I believe about creation, and it comes straight out of the Seventh-day Adventist belief. It says God is the creator of all things, and as revealed in Scripture, the authentic account of his creative activity. In 6 days, the Lord made the heaven and the earth, and all things upon the earth, and rested upon the seventh day of that first week. Thus he established the Sabbath as the perpetual memorial of his completed work. The first man and woman were made in the image of God as a crowning work of creation, given the nomination over the world, and charged with the responsibility to care for it. When the world was finished, it was very good, declaring the glory of God. And then the voted statements are given. And of course, as we know, voted statements are always text from the Bible. It's nothing that we say. It is always the Bible verses that is voted upon to give us our doctrine that we believe in. And so, in relation to that, what I believe when it comes to creation is a literal creation week. Okay? Now, when I was going through this, there's a lot said, there's a lot of views within the realm of our group, or call it Seventh-day Adventism, and all of them have valid reasons and claims for what they say. I believe that the first week is God's week, because man was only created on day 6, and therefore the whole week, which includes the Sabbath day, is God's week. I normally see it as a sort of ring-fenced week, okay? Because nowhere in that week, and I saw some questions coming up on various platforms about this as I was going through it, talking about, can you tell me, was it a 24-hour day from the first day? Well, we don't know that. The Bible doesn't say that. Okay, that leans sometimes to people saying, but creation took thousands and thousands and thousands of years. I also don't believe that. I believe God is a God of order. I believe he's almighty, and he can speak things into existence. And speaking something into existence for him is literally milliseconds. And therefore, I believe either the week that was made, was made within his time frame, but it is a time frame that would fit within a 24-hour day time frame for us today. If you take it that the heavenly bodies was made on day, let me just get it right, day 4, or day 3, the lights, or 4, yeah. It really is to make that, it's like making the clock. You put the clock mechanism in, the thing that makes the day and the night. Also, something that I believe, and I might be wrong, when he speaks to the fact that the earth was void, etc., actually says to me the earth was there. It was just, there was nothing there. And I also believe it was covered in water or surrounded by water. Therefore, all of these things are what I get from the Bible. Now, as we go along, we've got one on, okay. There's been a really significant debate, as I said, about this. And this comes from the paper, you'll see at the bottom there, that Solomon based his initial presentation at Terabella on. And I took this out. It says there has been a significant debate over when the biblical Sabbath day begins. Certain biblical texts seems to indicate that the day begins in the morning, and others that it begins in the evening. Scholars long believed that the day began at sunset according to Jewish tradition. Now, we have to be very careful here, all right? Because if you backtrack on this, there are actually mentions about day and night before the Jews, okay? And also sometimes what I hear or what I heard from while we were going through this initial study in 2017-18 is that this current situation that we keep the Sabbath evening, morning comes from Babylon. It's actually not true. Okay, and I'll show you at the end why it's not true. Scholars long believed that the day began at sunset according to Jewish tradition. Jews began their religious holidays in the evening, and their biblical mandates, the text mandates that the two most important religious feasts, the Passover and the Day of Atonement, begin at sunset. However, in recent years, many scholars, and read Adventist scholars, have begun to favor a different view. The day begins in the morning at sunrise. Although it may be somewhat foreign to the ancient Hebrew mind to rigidly define the day as a 24-hour period that always begins and ends at the same time, the controversy has important implication for the modern reader. Because the question arises, when does the Sabbath begin and end? And to add on to that, why it is important is because those hours are, in our belief, hallowed hours. Okay, and I always tell you about the video that Stephen Ball made here, explaining how the Sabbath was made holy. And the one thing I will never forget that he said is that God was physically in the hours of the Sabbath. Now, we're going to talk about that, okay? Because if God is in something, is there any darkness? Just a thought. Because the pictures we sometimes see is God sitting, and I was looking at them today, God sitting with Adam and Eve looking out over the Garden of Eden. It actually doesn't say that in the Bible. It says God was in the Sabbath. Okay, but let's continue. So Genesis 1:2 states that before God began his creative work, the earth was formless, void, and dark. Once the text established that the world was in a state of darkness and chaos, the biblical narrative records God's first creative work found in the Bible. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. Okay. So my first question to you folks is, was this the first light? Was there no light before? For me, the answer would be, there was light before. God, in fact, in terms of his presence, you can define as light. So if you backtrack on this, there was an angel of light in heaven. We all remember the angel of light. Who was that? Who became the angel of darkness? And so there was light. And I think, and I do believe, that in heaven, it looks different than it looks on earth in terms of light and day and night. I do believe that. But nowhere in the Bible does it confirm or deny what I'm saying. So what is light as used in that text? So it says there, I'm going to do the original literations or transliterations, but the definitions are light, the light of day, the light of heavenly luminaries, being sun, moon, and stars, daybreak, dawn or morning light, daylight, lightning, light of the lamp, light of life, light of prosperity, light of instruction, light of faith, figuratively speaking of God, Jehovah as Israel's light, and that is from the original origin H2 215. In 1 John 1:5, it also says God is light. It says, and this message is the message that we have heard from him and are declaring to you that God is light and that there's no darkness in at all in him. Okay? So when I read that and I think about God creating with his son, then immediately from the moment that the Bible starts, I believe that there was light, because here 1 John 1:5 says there's no darkness in him. So literally, there cannot be any darkness in heaven. Would I be correct or not if I made that assumption? Maybe, maybe not, but that's what I believe. The Thayer definition says in this case, it speaks about the light emitted by a lamp. It's slightly different, okay? But the one here at the bottom, metaphorically, which I hate, but it's metaphorically, God is the light because light has the extremely delicate, subtle, pure, brilliant quality of truth and its knowledge, together with spiritual purity associated with it, which is exposed to the view of all, openly, publicly, reason and mind. So I don't want to be facetious, but God is not a light switch. He doesn't switch on and off. God is light. There's permanent light. So in his presence, there would never be darkness. Hence back, when I go back to the creation side of it, there was light. And within this light, he created, call it the ecosystem of earth, which had darkness and light. So with all of these things, it boils really down to when we go through and reading through the first chapter of Genesis, as he creates, at the end of it, there now comes a time which the Sabbath comes forth. And according to the Bible, the Sabbath is a day of rest and holiness that should be kept by not working. The fourth commandment states, the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. Keep the Sabbath holy by not working. This includes not having others work on your behalf, such as business owners. The biblical ban on work also includes activities like cooking, baking, traveling, starting fires, gathering wood, buying and selling, and carrying burdens. But we are living in modern times, and things have changed around these things. Seven-day Adventist sources, and there's some very interesting thing, folks. I couldn't, in fact, I found the 3 different sites and I gave 3 different things. But according to some of the sources, it says, what do we do on a Sabbath? We attend Sabbath services. We participate in spiritually enriching activities like evangelism. In fact, it said we fast, but I think that's incorrect. I don't know if you agree with me. The Sabbath is not for fasting, it's for feasting. Okay, and that I've heard somebody like a Stephen Bohr speak directly about. I've heard some other pastors as well over the years talking, and I've asked the question. The Sabbath is a time of joy, a time of celebration. Okay, it's not a fasting. I think the only fasting one is atonement that we have within the cycle. But I actually saw an article this afternoon where people are talking that people fast during Sabbath. Be it as it may, I believe it's a time for feasting. Reading good books, which I will never disagree with. Praying, absolutely. Studying the scriptures, for sure. Visiting the sick, yes. Preaching the gospel and visiting with family. And look there, it says visiting with family. I actually went through and it just says family, it doesn't say friends. It's interesting that. Yeah. So the principles guiding Sabbath observance although the Bible does not deal directly with many of these specific questions we may have regarding Sabbath observance in our day, it does provide us with general principles that are applicable today. And it gives a whole range of text. The law forbids secular labor on the rest day of the Lord. The toil that gains the livelihood must cease. No labor of worldly pleasure or profit is lawful upon that day. But as God ceased his labor of creating, and rested upon the Sabbath and blessed it, so man is to leave the occupations of daily life and devote those sacred hours to healthful rest, to worship, and to holy deeds. That comes from Desire of Ages, page 207. This concept, however, is not supportive of total inactivity. Now, I know many times over the years I've had this conversation with people, and especially like I mentioned to you at the beginning, I used to be a briquette. I used to be so excited on the Sabbath. I used to do so much on the Sabbath. I used to run for 24 hours on the Sabbath and then rested on the Sunday. I don't know if that sounds familiar to any of you, but I used to be pooped by the end of the Sabbath, and then some, because I still had the shop on a Saturday evening as well, which would sometimes take up to 3-4 hours more time. So I would start on a Friday evening with Friday evening going to church for prayer, Sabbath morning early, okay, because I led out in Sabbath school. Then potluck or whatever it was, afternoon mission work or some type of, well, we had training, which I don't think was right. But anyways, or something from the conference side or whatever. And then in the evening, there was then Vespers. And then after that, the shop would be open and we would get home 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock some Saturday evenings. And it went on for 7 years. And so for me, the Sabbath wasn't a time of rest. And so every time I read this thing about the inactivity, and there's a lot of people who are inactive on the Sabbath, and there's nothing wrong with it. Okay. Some of us try to do all of these things in one day. Well, I try to do it all the time, but you could see that the Sabbath was set aside for a lot of other things in people's minds. So the concept, like I said, is not support of total inactivity. Okay. Both the Old and New Testaments invite us to care for the needs and alleviate the sufferings of others. For the Sabbath is a good day for all, particularly the lowly and oppressed. Now, yeah, I give some text and I've read through it, and I actually want to go into a bit deeper because I don't actually think some of these texts say that. Yet even good works on the Sabbath must not obscure a chief biblical characteristic of the Sabbath observance, namely rest. This includes physical and spiritual rest in God. So you can't do all of this stuff and then expect to walk away from it rested. Okay. And I think that's sometimes a dichotomy, especially like Sandy said, for people of us that when is new in a church that didn't grow up with a church. Richard O'Full had such a beautiful story that he told us, and I'll never forget him. He was really, for me, also a person. I met him face to face once, and I mentioned to you what he told me many years ago. But he actually wrote about it in his book, that in his whole career as a pastor, okay, while his children was growing up, he never went to somebody else's houses for potluck, and he didn't invite anybody to his house for potluck. He spent it with his family, which is what the previous slide said. Okay. Now, his is a very sad story about his son, I think it was, and the drugs and so on. And when he said it, I'll never forget at camp meeting, there was like a deadly silence. It was like everybody switched off and they said, no, that's not going to happen. Okay. Yeah, the pastor needs to come to whatever, and we need to talk about what happened in the week, etc., etc. Potluck in the afternoon, and we sit there and we watch the woman wash the dishes. It's quiet out there. So anyways, so the physical rest, whatever, and the spiritual rest, there needs to be a balance on it. How that happens for you, that's between you and the Lord. But I don't think you need to feel guilty if you rest, if you take a nap in the afternoon. Why would you feel guilty about that? I really today really spent some quality time with the Lord. Okay. And I sat in this chair and I fell asleep. I had a power nap for about 20 minutes. until my neck snapped and I woke up again. It's being old that does that to you sometimes. But I felt rejuvenated and I felt ready and I could read again. And I so enjoyed what I did today. And so it goes on to say, the latter leads the Sabbath observer to seek the presence of and communication with God in worship, both in quiet meditation and public worship. Now, the church really punts for us to be there, but at the bricks and mortar place, especially if you're part of a congregation, you get roped into various tasks, etc., etc. Some more than others. Let's face it. It will always be an issue in any church. Okay, some people are more willing to do, and others are just there to be in the background, which is good. Okay, there needs to be people like that as well. But at the end of the day, there needs to be some type of balance. And I sometimes think that the Sabbath is then really disregarded, the spirit of the Sabbath, by what we do in the church. Then one of the things I came across was the differences between Seventh-day Adventists and between Jews and Adventists when it comes to Sabbath keeping. And some very interesting things here. It says several of the Sabbath keeping differences lie rather with the method rather than the principle or belief. While these practices can vary between individuals, many Jews who keep the Sabbath make several safeguards are in place. This is to make certain that the Sabbath isn't broken, even unintentionally. Okay, so when we just to then go back to what the topic of this presentation is about, it talks then about when does the Sabbath start. So that is one of these type of things. People want to have a safeguard to know that the Sabbath starts in the right place. And we all know, and I'm going to talk about it just now, but that in Ellen White's time, there was the 6 to 6 story, okay, 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock at night, whatever the story was around it, when the Sabbath ran, okay, instead of sunset to sunset. And in that whole thing, okay, there was a decision made, okay, and the church then went the way we are today. So it's a traditional, we can say it's a traditional way. And it's very, very the same. It is the same that as the Jewish community holds it. Okay. But it was an important issue for Sabbath keepers, and it still is. And hence, when it comes to people who say that the Sabbath starts on a Saturday morning, okay, with the morning, in other words, the sunlight, the morning, okay, it's important for them to have those hallowed hours because that is what they are trying to protect, the hallowed hours. Now, I'm going to show you the overlap and things just now and what it is they're really trying to or really achieving at the end of the day. So, for example, when it comes to the Sabbath beginning at Friday sunset, some Jewish communities have a tradition of lighting Sabbath candles about 18 minutes before the sun is proposed to set. We used to have that when I started. We used to do that. These days, we are just quiet. I like to play hymns and songs and whatever. And the major reason for that is I miss church desperately. And not the people, sorry to say, but I miss corporate worship. I miss singing hymns. I miss the atmosphere because it creates the atmosphere of God being there in a corporate environment. And I really do miss that. Okay, so we have a way of doing it here. Your way might be very different to mine. But the big thing for us is to really make it less burdensome and more of a joy. That over the years I've learned, out of all the things I've done, is that the Sabbath is supposed to be a joy. And so this helps provide a grace period for days when the sun is cloudy and harder to see, and the sun sets to accommodate watches and clocks to set different times. And it's like us here this evening as well and this morning, okay? One of the things I also found out while we're talking about this last week from this pastor as well that spoke to me about this topic because he believes that the Sabbath starts on a Saturday morning, is that there was another person in our ministry that now believes that we should keep the Sabbath on Jerusalem time. And that was a first for me. I hadn't heard that one before. Maybe you've heard of it. But I can understand why he's saying that, because all of this starts to get very confusing, okay? Because we are trying to be, in my opinion, legalistic now. We are now trying to be like the Jews. We are now trying to really nitpick, okay? We are trying to make it so onerous that we are the only ones right and everybody else is wrong. We are so scared of God that at the end of the day, rather than follow what we have learned, what has worked, we are now in a position where we are scared of everything that might cost us our eternal life. And I don't think that's what the Lord wants us to do. Many Orthodox Jews have also come up with creative solutions to make certain, like I said, that no work is done on the Sabbath. For instance, Jews that keep the Sabbath in this way will not drive to the synagogue for Sabbath services. That's why those communities are all together, very much like our communities in Loma Linda and all those other places. Okay, people choose to walk instead. We drive to church, okay, folks. Here in South Africa, that wouldn't work for us. We have to drive to church. Okay, so there wasn't cars in the Bible, so we would accept that the Lord would understand if we have to drive for corporate worship. I don't think he's going to have too much of an issue with that. In some buildings, you might find that the elevator is programmed to automatically stop on every floor on the Sabbath, because pushing buttons is considered a form of work, since the act completes an electric circuit. Now, once again, that's legalistic, okay, in my opinion. But that's tradition within the Jews, and that's what they believe. It's also common for Orthodox Jews to refrain from carrying money or writing or typing on the Sabbath. Now, I was thinking about that this afternoon. That to me, there's two things in there. Okay, that's how, obviously they don't tithe or give offerings on the Sabbath day, which is strange because it does talk about it on the Sabbath day in the Bible, and not carrying money. Yeah. But the writing and typing, I don't know how that would work for me, because I used to really do sit in church and write in my Bible on a separate piece of paper, make notes if I heard something. So how would that work? Then the foundation of all these practices among the Orthodox are called the Avot Melacha, which covers 39 main categories of labor. So they've got it down to 39 categories. It's just too much for my mind to think about. And these prohibitions include things like fresh water to a vase to cut waters, to cut flowers, applying makeup, rubbing soap to make lather, opening an umbrella, wearing eyeglasses that aren't permanently required, and brushing mud from your shoes. There are also some objects that Jews are discouraged from even touching on the Sabbath, like phones, computers, flashlights, money, pens or pencils, etc. These are all objects typically associated with work. Now you're going to ask me, why am I doing all of this and why I'm telling you all of this? Well, it's not to show that we're different from Jews, but it does show that some of these things, okay, we as Christians use, because I'm on a computer to you, okay, basically on a telephone, if you want to use internet as that, okay. There's money lying right here. I was writing with a pencil and a pen today, okay. So if I was a Jew, I was now breaking the law and I was breaking the Sabbath. So let's use an example, because if you use those previous things and you think about that and you start going down a rabbit hole with those things, if you start thinking, well, if I do this, what else am I doing wrong? And the reason I'm saying this once again is because when I look at this aspect of when the Sabbath begins, it's one of those type of questions for me. What am I doing wrong? What is keeping me from going to heaven? Is it doing this stuff? Touching a phone, writing, whatever. Okay? It makes me then think of something that was mentioned to me also on Facebook, by the way. And I know all of you, okay, will tell me, Hein, we don't cook on the Sabbath. And that's good. Okay? But what does cook mean? As somebody who came into the church, that was one of the weirdest things for me really to understand was, what do you actually mean by that? Okay. Then Exodus 35 gives the reason. It says, and Moses gathered all the congregation of the children of Israel together and said to them, these are the words which the Lord has commanded for you to do them. 6 days shall work be done, and on the seventh day there shall be to you, which shall be to you a holy day, a Sabbath of rest to the Lord. Whatever does work in it shall be put to death. Then, and folks, really, you must go read this chapter. There's only one thing it says here before it goes on to something else. It says, you shall kindle no fire throughout your living spaces upon the Sabbath day. Why did they kindle fire? Warmth, cooking. Okay. And that was basically the main reasons, warmth and cooking. But also, we tend to forget that there were sacrifices on the Sabbath as well. And it was a question that came up to me. So what happened to the sheep that was supposed to be sacrificed on that day, if no fire could be kindled? Well, let's leave that for now, because that's got to do with the Old Testament and the Jews at that stage. But the Lord did say, you shall kindle no fire throughout your living places upon the Sabbath day. So do we, as Seventh-day Adventists that believe we don't cook on the Sabbath because we see it as work, okay? Do we abide by this? Do we kindle fire in our houses? Well, I said to the person on Facebook, no, we don't go out there and light a fire. But in this country, every time I put on a light, every time I heat some water for something to drink because it's icy cold, or I have a shower, okay, there's a power plant on the other side that kindles a fire, a coal fire in our country, because we are coal-driven electricity in my country. Am I breaking the Lord's law here? Or when I go to church, like I used to do, and there's potluck at the bottom left there, and they heat up the food, is that not a type of cooking? No, they told me we're preparing the food. But my question is, you're kindling a fire. They didn't say don't cook. They said don't kindle a fire. And so when you use heat, when you use electricity, you're kindling a fire. When you sit, like they do on the bottom right hand there, and there's electricity, there's a microphone, there's sound, whatever, it's all driven through electricity. Somebody somewhere is kindling a fire to make that work. And so when next are we going to ask the question? So are we breaking God's law by doing this stuff? Well, the warning is, once you go down a rabbit hole, there's no going back. And so folks, I use that as an example. And some of you might take this very seriously in terms of things. And some of you might say to me, I don't use electricity. It's fine. Okay. But when you go read what Seventh-day Adventists really say at the end of the day about this, they sort of use the opposite of a biblical or Orthodox Jew to say, well, we in modern times now, we do X, Y, and Z. It's more metaphorical, etc., etc. That's why electricity is okay, and so on, whatever. And we don't really break the Lord's law, etc., etc. But people tend to go on down these paths the whole time. It's like they're searching for something. And so there are many verses in the Bible, and there are some of them that shows that the Sabbath day begins at sundown on a Friday and ends at sundown on a Saturday. And the real question, to get down to it now, is this question that the pastor said to me. You know, Hein, you go read the Bible, and he was trying to explain to me the Sabbath starts on a Saturday morning, which if you look here, you'll see in the middle, I've got the light part in the morning, and it ends in the evening. Okay, and then they use certain examples, text, okay, which quite frankly, I don't get. And it doesn't say that to me. Okay. It's very similar to some of the arguments made, for instance, on various other topics like the feast or like the Trinity, etc., where people are just attaching a meaning to something rather than actually looking what the text says in context. So currently what we're doing as supposedly traditionalists, we start in the evening, which is 12 hours, and then there's a morning or a day, which is 12 hours. They start in the day, which is 12 hours, and end in the evening. Now, folks, question. What do we have in common? What do we have in common? The day. The Sabbath day. When do we all worship? Both those who believe it starts in the morning and those who believe it starts in the evening. We all worship during the day. The folks that believe that the Sabbath starts in the morning, okay? What do they do in the evening of the Sabbath? Nothing. Some of them have told me, yes, they have, sometimes they will gather together and so forth, whatever. But here's the thing. Most of them told me they sleep. Okay, it's fine. No problem with that. But when do you worship? No, in the morning. Well, when you come to me and say to me, Hein, you are worshiping on the wrong Sabbath, then I say to you, you're talking nonsense, because we actually worship on the same day or morning. All you are doing is defending the evening. And the evening to me is the darkness. So in fact, you are actually defending the darkness. So here's what the Bible says to me. Day 6. Genesis 1:31 says, very clear. Okay, because people start there at the second day and they come through evening, and it was evening and morning the second, evening, morning the third, evening, morning the fourth, etc. And they go and they try and prove a point. Forget it. Let's start at day 6, because this is where the crux of the problem lies. The whole argument starts. And Exodus Genesis 1:31 says, and God saw everything that he had made, indeed, and it was exceedingly good. And the evening and the morning were the 6th day. Now look again at my little slide. Evening, darkness, morning, light. Okay. And that is where day 6 ended, was at the end of that day, at the end of that light. It goes on to now to Genesis 2:1 or 2:2, and it says, it now gives where did God go to from there, from day 6. It says, and by the beginning of the 7th day, God finished his work. Where did he finish? Well, it ended of day 6 at the end of the day, and at the beginning, if I read this correctly, and I go through the cycle of night, day, then that should have been night, because night would have been, or darkness would have been, the beginning of the 7th day. It doesn't say at the beginning of the 7th day in the light or day or whatever. It says at the beginning, just the beginning. That's how my Bible read. And I went through a couple of different versions. Okay. He rested on the 7th day. Okay. from all his work that he made. Now, to get back to what I said a bit earlier on, God is light. There's a second way for people to look at it. If he was in the day, the Sabbath day, the whole day, I like to think, I might be wrong again, please don't stone me, but I like to think that God's Sabbath was a day of 24-hour light. Okay, and I'll tell you in a moment why that would work as well. In that light, he had to make everything holy. When God makes things holy, okay, it has to be in his presence. The day, he was in the day, so it was in his presence. He cannot make anything holy in darkness. And therefore, despite him creating all of these evening, morning, God's specific holy day, which he rested on. It doesn't say Adam and Eve rested on it or anybody else rested. He rested on. Would have been, in my opinion, a day of light. Total light. If you want to call it 24-hour light. Okay. Now, after the day, God's Sabbath day, the first one, which I was told and I still believe was God's Sabbath day. The very next day, which would have been day one again, would have started in the same cycle, which have been evening, morning. After 24 hours light, if Adam and Eve was there, they would have been, well, I don't say they would have been tired, but there would have been a period of darkness again, because now man's day would have started. And either way, being what the Bible says here, by the beginning of the seventh day, if we take this slide, or if we take the second slide, both of them actually work. It does not work in terms of what these people who say the other way around works. Now, add that to things like Jesus on the cross, the time frame around that, when he came from the tomb. Okay, all of those things we can add to this. So like I said, what is defended and what is disputed? And the only thing that is being disputed is the evening, the darkness. Like I said, Solomon did a much more intricate, much more, call it an authoritative, academical type of presentation. For me, this is a very personal thing, much more around that. And that's why I did it in this way. These are my thoughts. These are how I think. You might be totally horrified by now and think, Hein, you know what, where on earth did you come up with this nonsense? But this is what I honestly believe after being an Adventist for 15 years. Okay. Ellen White says about this controversy in her time, I saw that it is even so, from even to even shall ye celebrate your Sabbath. Take the word of God, read it, read carefully, and ye shall find what even is and when it is. I asked the angel if the frown of God had been upon his people for commencing the Sabbath as they had. I was directed back to the first rise of the Sabbath and followed the people of God up to this time, but did not see that the Lord was displeased or frowned upon them. I inquired why it had been done thus, and at this late day we must understand, but not yet, not yet. Said the angel, if light come, and that light is set aside or rejected, then comes the condemnation of and the frown of God. But before the light comes, there is no sin, for there is no light for them to reject. I saw that it was in the minds of some that the Lord had shown that the Sabbath commenced at 6 o'clock, and I had only seen that it commenced at even, and it was inferred that even was at 6. I saw that the servants of God must draw together and press together. And so they had to go through that process as well of understanding the start of the Sabbath, because they were not Seventh-day Adventists when they started. They were not born into the church. And so they also had to learn and understand and study and come to a conclusion. And Ellen White says, Testimonies for the Church in the early 1900s. Remember that every moment is consecrated holy time. Wherever it's possible, employers should give their workers the hours from Friday noon until the beginning of the Sabbath. Give them preparation. Ellen White, 1901, the setting of the sun on the evening of the preparation day, trumpet sounded, signifying that the Sabbath had begun. The next day, the courts of the temple were filled with worshippers. On Friday, let the preparation for the Sabbath be complete with the setting of the sun. Let all secular work be laid aside. Parents, explain your work to the children. Before the setting of the sun, let all secular work be laid aside. So at the bottom here, it says the vision was given at the setting of the sun, Friday evening, bearing the dateline of the Sabbath, June 6. I think for me, the thing that puts it to rest is when we go back and read what the Seventh-day Adventist Church writes about the Jewish people. Okay, one of the things we must understand about the Jews and day one, the Boker, okay, in Genesis 1, the day, the evening and morning, is that it is actually out of bounds and long deemed as a danger zone because of this controversy. And so rabbis did not and do not study the day. Okay. In fact, if you go read some of what it said, then I read some of it. There's actually a curse, supposedly, for somebody who studies the day in Genesis 1. So the sage's close reading of text often seems within striking distance of our contemporary critical approach, and sometimes they hit the mark. However, megalithic bulwarks held them back when it came to Genesis 1. The mere contemplation of any alternative understanding would have been an anathema insomuch as it could threaten the Sabbath, which long before the rabbinic era, indeed as far back as Nehemiah, began with the nightfall on Friday. And there it is from the Torah itself. It says, Nehemiah 13:19. When shadows filled the gateways of Jerusalem at the approach of the Sabbath, it gave orders that the doors be closed and ordered them not to be opened until after the Sabbath. I stationed some of my servants at the gates so that no goods should enter on the Sabbath. Once or twice, the merchants of the vendors of all sorts of wares spent the night outside Jerusalem. But I warned them, saying, what do you mean by spending the night alongside the wall? If you do so again, I will lay hands upon you. From then on, they did not come on the Sabbath. That is a beautiful painting that somebody painted about the creation. Let's pray. Our Father in heaven, Lord, thank you for the opportunity, Lord, to share the ideas that you've put in my mind. Lord, I hope that it's been of value to people. Lord, you know I've been contemplating and thinking about this the last week, and I thank you that you've led me and have given me access and shown me some things in the Word. Lord, I pray for the people who disagree with the stance around the Sabbath and the day that it starts. But I say thank you, Lord, that we do worship on the same day or daylight hours at least. Lord, the understanding of the Sabbath is that Sabbath is made for man and that man is not made for the Sabbath. We understand that your Sabbath, the one at creation, is holy. It was a sign and still is a sign for us as a prophetic people. Lord, help us to better understand the word, to better understand each other, but also to accept that there will be differences. Keep us away from being legalistic. And as the pastor said this afternoon, listening to his sermon, let's find the joy in our worship again. Because, Lord, that is what I really crave so badly, the joy. All of the things that made worship in church so joyful. Help us upon our way in this coming week and bless us during this Sabbath. We ask this in the mighty name of your Son, Yeshua. Amen.
Hein, I just want to say, I was getting a little bit confused. I understand what you're saying, but I think it is very biblical that it's sunset to sunset. And I have been through an awful lot and heard an awful lot. You say that you sleep, so we basically all keep the same Sabbath day. Well, this isn't necessarily true, because the sun can go down at 3 or 4 and you don't go to bed until 9 or 10. What do? Sleep? No, you don't. I have had people tell me that it is so nice to know that it's sunrise, because what do you do on Friday night when you have teens and they want to go to town? And I said, so you go shopping on Friday night because and yes, because it's dark, and dark doesn't, it's no big deal. We had somebody come to the camp meeting, and she said that she would get in at 3 a.m. on Sabbath morning to start doing stuff. And I said, well, why? And she says, because it's not sunrise yet, so it's not Sabbath. I mean, it was silly. It was like, why make it difficult? As far as what you do on Sabbath, sunset to sunset, I personally believe that's between you and God. I realize
Amen.
the Bible says certain things, but you can interpret them different. Just like the thing about kindling, you go back to what they did. That was a lot of work. Mrs. White, when she had to cook, I mean, goodness, they didn't have plumbing like we do. For showers, you turn it on. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not telling anybody. But as far as people trying to judge what you do on Sabbath, and some of them go to legalistic extremes. I know Daddy went to the Holy Lands, and they went into a elevator, and there was a rabbi there, and he said, would you please push the button? And it was like, okay, and stuff like this. But I think that is between you and God. You do need to cook. You don't have to make it a really big deal, but if you heat something up, I don't think that's a sin. If you do,
Absolutely.
you better not do it. But that's between you and God and what you do. I don't think you should go have big parties or go out shopping,
No.
and go out eating. There's people that say, well, it says that I can't cook, so I'll go out and eat. And I said, but somebody is, and you're paying for it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's
Yeah,
between
Sunny,
you and God.
Yeah, you understand why I used it. I used it as an example to illustrate. Okay. I didn't say it was so, because we all use electricity. We all, whatever, it's part of modern life. Okay. I wasn't saying it was wrong. All I was saying is, if you want to go down that rabbit hole, if you really want to start nitpicking, if you really want to get into stuff that is that you are trying to prove something, and for the most part, people don't understand what it is you're trying to prove. Okay, you're actually going down a rabbit hole and you're becoming legalistic. Okay, that old thing that every Seventh-day Adventist is so scared of. And for me, okay, the reason I showed the overlaps, okay, is if when they look at it, okay, I want them to see, okay, because I understand it's a 24-hour, and that's why I stressed over and over again, must understand that that whole day is holy, both night and day. That's why I used the 2 slides as well. The whole day is holy, okay? Therefore, there are certain things that you do within those hours. And I said, what do? We listen to music, we go to bed, we wake up the next morning, we have breakfast, we worship, we spend the day these days at home or whatever it might be, okay? Or we'll go out.
Majority believe in sunrise to sunset. And that comes from the 12-hour day, not 24. And where Jesus said you work for 12 hours. Yeah, but there's 24 hours in the whole day.
Yeah.
And so you count it the whole day, but they think that it's just those 12 hours is what's important. And they're missing half of it. That to me is against God's law.
Well, and I agree with you. I totally agree with you.
The blessing in the Sabbath. because there's a blessing in the entire 24-hour period. So they are missing out on the blessings that God
They think that
provides.
dark is evil. There's a lot of them that say that darkness is evil and you only have the 12 hours
And
in a day.
that's
Does that mean
Yeah.
that God leaves us when the sun sets? Is God
that's
afraid of the dark?
exactly
Because
what I
that's
was
what
trying
it
to
sounds
say.
It's
Yeah.
evil, it's evil time. And I'm like, well, he went to the garden and
Yeah.
it was evil. But I don't know. They have all kinds of arguments, a lot of them.
Yeah.
It's just sad. But
Hi,
I just
Hein.
say that so
Hello,
people
Brent.
Look
are
at all the
believing.
trouble you started.
Well,
Huh?
I grew up on a farm, and we went out on Sabbath. We milked the cows, and the reason we milk the
You have to.
cows, if you don't milk the cows,
No,
they're
absolutely.
miserable. Just like a mother with his child. Do you not
No.
feed breast milk to that child on a Sabbath?
Do you
That's
not
the same
change his
thing.
diaper?
Yeah, that's work.
So,
And it's
So-
and it
so-
goes by this text that you had in Nehemiah, where he stationed his servant at the gate. Him station his servant at the gate, isn't that doing work?
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So once again, okay, that's why I did the 3 thing to show that what we keep is the full 24, what they keep basically, and what they try and reject or defend or whatever is the darkness side of it. Okay. And so that's why they go back to the day. And that's why day has become so important for them, because they, like you say, it's not 12 hours. Well, it's 12 hours for them and whatever. And by the way, I read through it again. There's 2 thinking around that as well, but I'm not going to go into that. It's just, it becomes so complicated.
Wow.
All I want to do is to have 24 hours of, like Melissa says, the blessing. That is why I love the feast so much, because I know, and I'm, in the beginning when you start keeping the feast, it's difficult because you don't understand. It's not part of the cycle of